So we're going to do white man's chicken curry today. Now it's called white man's chicken curry because the cut of the chicken is technically a cut I wouldn't normally use, but a few things have happened that have caused me to rethink about how I cook some of the time. One is, you'll see this is a new kitchen, so we've moved house. And the stovetop doesn't have quite the same oomph as the other one. There's also not the same space. So it's been a little bit of a revelation actually, because in all of the complexity of working with masala and cooking these sorts of traditional dishes, I've had the luxury of space, and it's been, there's been a sense of ease around it. So constricting the kitchen means a little bit of a different approach sometimes. Now, what we're working with here is just chicken thigh, and there's no skin and there's no bone. So this is a very simplified cook, but because there's no skin and no bone, it requires a slightly different approach. It's a lighter cook, it's a lighter dish, but it also requires a little bit more thought around fats and around texture. Now, with this video, what we're actually going to focus on is fat usage and how to really create flavor with fat scaffolding. The texture part I'm going to do as a separate video, and I'm going to put that link in the description just so that it doesn't elongate too much, because it's quite complex. The masala can be a little bit of anything, and I'll cover that as we go through. But the first thing I'm going to do is just chop the chicken thighs in a really rough way until they're just, you know, like 1 inch by 1 inch cubes. So the thing about using chicken thigh is when you remove that idea or the reality of skin and bone, you take away implicit flavor. So the skin and the bone really does contain a lot of the essence of the bird. In order not to have this dry out or just fall flat, because masala does better when it has a beautiful carriage, we're going to up the fat ante. So the fats I'm going to play with are ghee, yogurt and mustard oil, and I've got 4 chicken thighs here. And we do have to be a little bit careful about the measure of oils and fats, because the chicken won't absorb as much. We're not cooking for as long, so it's not going to dissipate in the same way that it might if we were doing a more traditional dish. And what we don't want is a moat of oil in the bottom of this dish, because the meat itself, that protein without the skin and the bone, is lighter, and it won't carry a really, really oily dish well. It will just taste oily. So, okay, so let me bring my fats on over. Now the reason for using ghee, mustard oil and yogurt together is because what we're trying to do with fat is replace the impact of skin and bone in terms of flavor. So when we're dealing just with chicken thigh flesh, and please do use chicken thigh, like the breast will actually, it will fall really, really flat. Spice has a really difficult time penetrating chicken breast when there's no skin and bone. We're actually going to kind of create a structural input in the base of the dish with fat. So mustard oil is going to give it like a very dark shadowed floral quality. Mustard oil also has a slightly astringent nature. So it's actually kind of got a astringent spice you need to think about as being piercing. It will actually pierce into produce and open that produce up to receive flavor. And that's really invaluable when it comes to a meat like a chicken. It doesn't have the inherent fat content of lamb or mutton, for example. The ghee is going to create a second tier flavor, which is very sort of smooth and sweet and creamy. So on top of that dark shadowed astringent quality, we're going to get smooth and creamy, and then it's going to allow the masala or the spice to play out through the mustard oil, through the ghee. And then the yogurt to finish is to create a little bit of density. So yogurt in the traditional sort of Kashmiri Hindu way of cooking We will split the yogurt. It's going to create a sense of caramelization. So it's like a faux, the caramelization is like a faux skin almost on the chicken. And just a bit of a richer mouthfeel. So richness is also, that sort of weight also mimics flavour. So the palate will read rich weight as being more delicious than something that's thinner. So we can kind of manipulate how the mouth reads flavour in order to use proteins that will cook faster but still create really beautiful end result. So I'm going to use about a tablespoon of mustard oil. All right, so a bit of, oh, hang on, wait, let me turn it on. So about, maybe that was a tablespoon and a half of mustard oil. 2 tablespoons of yogurt to start. And then a tablespoon of ghee. Okay, now that's going to heat. Now what it does also to use yogurt and ghee and not just mustard oil, because I have made this dish before with mustard oil and vegetable oil and it did get a little bit oily. I had to put like heaps more tomato and like spinach in there to kind of soak it up, which wasn't terrible, by the way. But you can see that there's actually a density of fat and that this will create a natural thickness in the gravy, so it won't feel thin and oily. One of the things about really runny oils or like less viscous fats, so mustard oil, vegetable oil, peanut oil, is that if there's too much of them in the pan, they will kind of coat the mouth too heavily and they'll have the inverse effect. So normally we use fat as a carriage to allow masala to express or to allow spice to express. When there's too much oil around the mouth, it actually becomes a prohibiting factor. So it arrests the mouth's ability to actually see through the fat into the spice, and you just get that very kind of slick, oil slick kind of a flavour. I need my handy Trav, I think you're just going to have to be in some of the shots. I'm just going to have to, you're going to see the workings of the video in the video. So one of the things about this masala with this chicken dish is because it's like totally non-traditional, we can actually just do whatever we want. So I'm really not too specific about the combination of spice we put in here. One thing though that I will put is I make sure that in the bed, because I'm trying to really imbue a lot of flavour into that skinless, boneless meat, and you know, really no fat. There's almost no fat on that chicken at all. Whole cinnamon quill, couple of black cardamom pods. We're actually going to put quite a lot of whole spice in here. Just 2 little star anise, and that should be enough, maybe. 2 cloves. So that's quite pungent, and those are spices structural spice can withstand really high heat. And then the chicken. So you just really want to do it. See how the yogurt split and kind of become like milk solids? That's good. Split yogurt good. And then the chicken goes in. You can see like hardly any fat. And you can see how rich that is. And just browning up. We're going to brown up a little bit in this, cook it down. It doesn't actually cook for a very long time, which is why we also have a shortened period of time in which to encourage the produce to take in all that masala as well. In longer cooks, there's just a lot more scope for the masala to sort of grow and express and change and be tempered and transmuted through the fat and through the thyme and through the heat. Thyme, T-I-M-E. when you shorten cooking times, you kind of got to punch up the flavour a little bit. That's enough. So there's quite a lot of information on the channel about browning meat, and I will do a separate video on actually how to stir meat while you're browning it in a kadai like this. But you can see that I'm actually not moving it around very much because I want it to get a good seal on one side, and I want to see the fat thin. So the yogurt is becoming less dominant and it's actually sticking to the side of the meat, and then what we've got is more oily consistently. It smells amazing. Just a little bit of browning, keeping in mind it's not going to super brown because there's actually not a lot of fat to render. So I just want it to get some colour because colour denotes taste, and to cook out a little bit more before I put the masala in and the vegetables. I'm going to put a bit of green bean and a bit of tomato in here as well. So one of the things about my current stovetop is it actually doesn't get very hot, and that's a bit of an issue when it comes to browning meat. So one of the ways to create more temperature is to inject like liquid into the oil at an advanced stage of the cooking process, because it's going to cause the oil to sort of spatter and to burst, like have a burst of flame and heat. So that's what I'm going to do now. So there are ways and techniques to get around like limitations in the kitchen, and I think they're actually really good things to learn, because it can feel sometimes that, well, I know that when I moved from a really beautifully equipped kitchen to something that had less heat, less space, I had to learn a few little new techniques in order to just kind of cook the way that I wanted to. So I'm just keeping the skin on. I want them to go in really wet, not parboiled, or I really want all that liquid, so it's going to create quite a lot of noise and like a really big heat flare, and that's going to help the browning process. So if you just come across, you'll see. That also helps the gravy a bit. Just realised I didn't put salt in before. So I'm going to put 3 different salts in just because I do. Half a teaspoon of fine pink salt, half a teaspoon of a fine white lake salt, and a half a teaspoon of a white sea salt. Oh, that's looking better. See? Oh, yummy. All right. What we have to do now is the masala. So really this can be anything, and I'm not really going to labour it in the video. I will put all the notes for why I'm using what I'm using in the recipe, and the recipe link is always underneath the video, so it's in the description box. Suffice to say, you could, once you've got that stage, you could use like any kind of dry spice blend. Don't use a wet one because you need to render off. If it's like a wet paste, you actually need heat to kind of, so it's not raw, and that's already got too much liquid and fat in it. It's too far in the cooking process. But also you can just ad lib. So generally when I make this, because there's so much structural spice in the bottom of the pan, and that creates kind of like a depth and a density and a certain pungent quality, I play a bit lighter, and I also play with texture. And I'm going to talk about texture at seasoning in another video, as I said earlier. The description's in the link below. But turmeric powder, a half teaspoon. 2/3 of a teaspoon of Kashmiri chili. Fennel, because I love it, teaspoon. 2 teaspoons of cumin seed, tomato, a half a teaspoon of cumin powder, 1 teaspoon of ginger powder, and 2 teaspoons of fennel powder. Fennel powder and ginger powder together are a real Kashmiri Hindu thing, so I don't know, it just makes it taste like family. And cinnamon, let's do, shall we? Let's do like 1/3 of a teaspoon of cinnamon. So that just goes in. Ready? And it doesn't need much. In fact, you know what? I'm actually not going to put the green beans in. Maybe I should. What do you think? Oh, yum. Like, it's rich and sort of light, but you can see, so the whole purpose of this video is to show you, can you see how much gravy has been created? Not by skin and bone, but by using 3 different types of fat with different fat densities, and a really short cooking time, so I'm not cooking it out too much. I'm actually going to stop that. Just going to make sure the chicken's cooked. Yeah, that's perfect. Let's see there. As long as it's not pink on the inside. That's it. So, white man's chicken curry. As a friend of mine who is a white man did say to me, it's more elaborate than any chicken curry he'd ever put together. So maybe it's the wrong kind of name, but I guess what we're talking about here is like non-traditional, it's like a non-traditional, well, that's not true. It's a cleaner cut of meat, it's a faster cooking time, but we're replicating depth of flavour by using multiple fats and a very textured masala blend. It's delicious. Earthy, like it's quite sweet, very rich. Very rich in terms of gravy, but the chicken itself, hang on, let me just do a taste test for you. By the way, if you do have my spice blends, you could do up to the masala, or the creation of the masala that I did just in my palm, you could do all the dish up to that point and then just use like a tablespoon or, you know, a tablespoon and a half of any one of the spirit of spice blends, and you could have the same effect. I'd probably use the cinnamon one, but that's just me. Oh, yum. Yeah, the carriage of the chicken is really light, but the fats create the hold and the density. So you get this like really, it's a deceiving amount of flavour for the cut of the meat and the amount of time we've put into actually cooking it. That's pretty brilliant. Yum.